this was essentially the first kiss and tell story about you, which was in January 1996. Now, we're not going to invade your privacy all over again, so it's entirely up to you what you want to say about that. But this was a Daily Mirror story written by Kate Thornton. Can you just tell us the mechanics of it? How does a kiss and tell story work?
Well, there's a pattern because it's happened to me a few times. And some of that is my responsibility, but it's the kind of thing that the kind of mistakes I've made in my personal life are the kind of mistakes that lots of people make, and they're not subject to that kind of intrusion because they're not, it's not of interest to the public. That's very different from being in the public interest, of course. But what the technique they'll use, have used time and again, is that they'll find one or two facts that is either conjecture or now we see in retrospect has been gained illegally, and use those facts to do a bluff on the person I was seeing at the time, whichever one it was, and they'll say, we're going to publish a story about you and Steve. It's going to be deeply unsympathetic. We're going to paint you in a very negative way, and we're going to do it anyway, but if you talk to us, we'll make you look really nice, and we'll be really kind to you, and you can be nice to Steve, and we'll give you some money. So what do you want to do? And what they say is, okay, well, I'll talk to you. So this is what they do time and again. In actual fact, it's a bluff because they don't have the wherewithal or the facts or the information or the research to back up their story. It's a bluff gained on a little bit of information. That's a technique they use again and again. So that's how the story came about.
Okay.
I didn't think what happened to me was particularly extraordinary. I thought it was quite typical, actually. But no one else was prepared to talk about it because they didn't want to rake over old coals because it's embarrassing. And so
one of the reasons you said that you wanted to get involved in this was the point you've just made, that actually that this wasn't an aberration, it was systemic.
Yeah.
Is that because from talking to your fellow actors and actresses and
just anecdotal experience and anecdotal experience from speaking to other people in the public eye who I know. I happen to know lots of people who are in the public eye because they're creative. Some people court the press, some people don't court the press. But either way, I thought that it was just about decency, and it seemed to me that the arguments that were being put forward were the only sort of defence by the more unscrupulous sections of the press was, well, everyone's a bastard, so we're just bastards, but everyone else is a bastard. Celebrities are bastards. Everyone's a bastard, so let's just all be bastards. That to me seemed to me their kind of defence was, no one's perfect, and my thing was well, it seemed really unfashionable to talk about just decency and treating people with respect. And especially in sort of postmodern age where it's okay to do crappy things if you admit it somehow. When I took the legal action, that was a conscious decision about, I had some evidence. I went on a little fishing expedition, which my lawyer said, it may be that you were targeted by these phone hackers. Do you want us to look into it? And to get the information out of the police, through my lawyers, and this was a gamble because they said, we can investigate and we may come back with nothing. And it will cost you close to £50,000 to go through this process. And we may then come back and say, there's nothing there. And I just had a feeling that there would be something there. So I gambled.
Can I ask, were you on a conditional fee arrangement?
No, I was paying.
So it was all risk for you?
Yes, it was all risk for me. In fact, at the end of the day, I spent, in this whole saga, £400,000. And I got back at the end of the day, from when it was all settled out of court, 370. So the whole thing I'm involved in, I'm £30,000 out of pocket.
Even after your
after the
costs and damages and everything.
Yeah, that was as much as I could get in the circumstances. But being £30,000 out of pocket for me was a relief because it was, that kind of money. I mean, yes, I'm obviously quite wealthy compared to most people, but that's a lot of money, and it keeps you awake at night. But I just thought, I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound. I'm just going to see it through.
People are going through your rubbish bins. They're following you in cars when you go home. People are camped outside your house in the place where you live. People are going to the pubs, talking to, and you described this as the horrible cumulative effect of being under constant surveillance.
Yes, that you'd have to, it's just, you have to think about everything you're going to do, I mean, it was for a period. It's not something that's defined my life the way it has other people, like Sienna Miller. I'm really kind of small fry compared to people like that. But yes, for a while, that's what it was like. Yeah. What they sometimes do is they say they do a bit of give and take, where they say, look, if you admit this, we'll keep that out. It's a little quid pro quo that they'll sometimes do with people that they're about to stitch up. He said, if you admit X, we'll keep out Y, and if you admit, A, we'll keep out B. And I said, okay, just keep out, sexual details. I don't want to embarrass my ex-wife's family and all the rest of it, and my family and all that stuff. And Andy Coulson called my manager and said, we've recorded the whole conversation, and that means we can prove everything, because he's admitted to it all in this phone call. So I was sort of stitched up by Andy Coulson, and they published everything in the newspaper. Now, and what they published was true, but it was something that I'd done. It was all my personal information, and I was vulnerable because of what I'd done. It was very traumatic, and that was that particularly was one of the reasons that when I was thinking about taking legal action was when Andy Coulson's hubris in going on to become sort of head of communications at Downing Street. It angered me that someone who would behave that way was at the heart of power. That was one of the motivating factors in the fact I'm going to pursue him.
So you say, I'll just read this paragraph out. You say, I don't think it was a malicious personal vendetta against me. My feeling is that it was a dispassionate sociopathic act by those who operate in an amoral universe where they're never accountable. And then you've got to describe how it's just part of a mindset. It's not personal, it's just business.
Indeed, and what Andy Coulson did to me, I don't think it was because he dislikes me personally. I think it's just bad behaviour. That it would have been anyone. It happened to be me.
You say that you've spoken to many high-profile people who feel as I do, but by their own admission, they don't have the stomach to complain or resist. So it's... In deciding, so at some point, as you've described, you decided to gear yourself up. You were going to take on these very big and powerful forces, but you must have gone into it thinking this is just opening the gates of hell in terms of what they could now do to me.
Yes. It was quite a lonely place to be when I started taking legal action. It's become this. It sort of grew and mushroomed and became a more comfortable place because there were lots of people who started to realise this was, as I said before, systemic, and it wasn't just me whinging, and it wasn't. But at the start, it was there was literally a handful of us, and.
Did you talk to each other?
No, I just looked at what people were doing, and I thought, I spoke to Martin Sixsmith, who I've been working with recently, who used to work for the Labour government and was a BBC journalist, and he said you could walk away from this, but you're a northerner and you're a bloody-minded northerner and you like a fight, sort of thing. And I thought, yeah, I like that part, so I'll do that. I also thought that I had my nose bloodied so many times, I really didn't feel particularly vulnerable, and I in some ways I still don't. I feel I'm privileged insofar as I've been doing this for 20 years. People, I'm sort of, to some extent, the public who like what I do are quite loyal to me and also have high expectations of what I do. But they are fairly loyal, and I've got a certain security in that. And so I didn't feel like if I angered News International, they could destroy my fan base. Because the people who like me mostly probably don't like News International. And I've got my issues, but they're things that normally people would have to deal with privately, and it's not what I do. I'm not a politician. I don't stand up and say I'm the paragon of virtue. I don't stand up and say I claim to be things I'm not. I'm just creative, and I just want to be judged by that and do things, and be judged on that basis, and be happy to be judged on that basis.